Shatama.
Now, so many things are happening in today's society. And one of the things that we're seeing is that, young people are really struggling to get a hand on the opportunities that they need to move in the world. And because of this, we have high unemployment rates, we have very low opportunities, and a lot of young people, especially here on the African continent, with the largest youth demographic all around the world. So because of this, across Africa, sexual exploitation of young people is increasingly shaped by economic vulnerability, digital platforms, and unequal power dynamics. What often begins as a promise of opportunity, a job, a casting call, or even financial support can also quickly sideline into manipulation and abuse. And that's the conversation we're having today. Just last week, in fact, there was a trending story here in South Africa of a young lady who went onto social media, spoke about the fact that she was looking for an opportunity in the world of modeling, got in contact through social media with a casting agency or a modeling agency who she says then exploited her sexually on camera. And that was something that also, trended online. That sexual exploitation was something that we could all be in full view of. So today we're unpacking how sexual exploitation takes root, how consent is manipulated or misunderstood, and why young people remain vulnerable to abuse. Joining us on the line is Professor Amanda Gouws, gender politics expert. Thank you so much, Professor Gouws, for your time. Good morning.
Good morning, and good morning to the listeners.
Well, it's a sad story to hear, but when I go to the comment section of this young lady, reaching out on social media and speaking about her experience, many people are saying, well, you're 20 years old. You should be, old enough to tell between right and wrong. You had an opportunity to say no. Why didn't you? Or you just wanted to participate. And there's a lot of victim blaming that happens. And the truth is, this is not the only time that the sexual exploitation is happening. Sexual exploitation has been happening for a long time and continues to take place. Why is this, Professor?
Okay, so I think we need to start with the terminology, right? So sextortion is the latest word we use, what used to be called quid pro quo sexual harassment. So I give you something in return for sexual favors. It's also now called sexual corruption because of the pervasiveness of this type of a phenomenon. And if we look at South Africa, and there's been a study done on sexual corruption in South Africa with a sample of 1,500, and this was a random sample, people, it was done by Ipsos. Over 80% of that sample said that they know about sexual corruption, or that they've been victims of sexual corruption. So it's quite widespread. But the bottom line here is that what it means is that you will apply for a job, or you will apply for promotion, or you're in school and somebody says to you, well, I'll give you that promotion, but you have to sleep with me. Or the teacher will say, well, I'll make sure that you pass the test, but I need some sexual favors from you. And I think what we need to do is also to distinguish between where there is a form of organized crime where people will be lured with the promise of jobs, and then their passports are taken away, or they get to another country, their passports are taken away, and they actually become sex slaves, versus where there is sort of, practices like in modeling, where that's sort of expected of women to comply with sexual favors. But none of this is acceptable, and it's also illegal to do this. So I think this exploits the vulnerability of people who need a job or need promotion. And there's always a power dynamic involved in this, where the person who offers you the job or the promotion or whatever has more power than you do.
You know, when we speak about these instances or when we hear about them, that we think that the actual conversation is the sexual acts or the sexual exploitation itself. But there's so many underlying societal reasons why these exist. And those are the reasons that we don't actually focus on when these conversations come up. Let's speak about that. What are the underlying factors that make it easier for sexual exploitation to take place in our societies, and also that further exacerbate these instances?
Yes, I think if we go back to the hashtag Me Too campaign it was in the 2017, where Harvey Weinstein, who was a big Hollywood producer, was actually outed by an actress who said that this man has been raping and sexually harassing women for years. So somebody doesn't come to you and say, "Oh, you need that promotion. I need sexual favors." It will be far more subtle than that. Somebody will come and say, "Okay, well, you are beautiful. Come to my modeling agency," and then slowly but slowly, there's a grooming process. Of sort of making that person feels that she is the center of attention, that she's really, somebody this person is interested in as a model. But the person is not interested in you as a model. It's interested in you as what you can offer as sexual favors. And so women do not, most often do not consent to the sex. They consent to the job they want or consent to what they need in order to get promotion. And that's why consent here is it's a very tricky issue, because in the end, if you've been groomed for a long time, you think that this person is also interested in you as having a relationship with you. But that is not about the relationship. And any consent that's given in um, a situation where there is a power differential and where the person offering what you is something has more power, that consent is not truly consent. And this is what makes it so murky, because and why people blame the victim, because they would say, "But you've been working with that guy for 6 months and now you complain." So it's a far more subtle process in most cases than we think it is, and that's what makes it complicated.
It is complicated indeed. And I want us to delve deeper in that conversation of consent and choice, right? Because in this instance that I use an example, we're speaking about a 20-year-old individual. And people are saying, well, 20 sounds like it's old enough, right? You're not a child. But there are things, like you said, power dynamics that influence consent and choice. Do we really have a choice when these power dynamics exist? And how does that actually work?
So if we look at the study that was done, the majority of people who said that they know and are aware of this was between 15 and 35. So it's younger people. Very often they come from poor backgrounds, so they are vulnerable. And when you look at this, in the sense that if I say yes to something, it doesn't mean that I want to give you the sexual favors. But in some cases, people are so desperate, they need the job. They have to think about what will happen if I do not consent. So they either won't get the job, or they won't get the promotion, or they won't pass the test. And that's what actually very often leads to saying yes to the sexual favors, which then is constructed as consent. But is the problem that there is also an aspect of desperation, especially in this country where um, joblessness is over 70% for people between 18 and 25. So very often, you've now already paid a lot of money for transport to get where you have to go to get to the interview, and you will just keep going because you cannot come a second time, or you cannot afford to lose this money that you've already spent on transport and so on. So, I mean, and that's the vulnerability then that then gets exploited.
All right, Professor, stay on the line. We're going to take a break and we'll come back and unpack this conversation further. We're speaking about sexual exploitation, how it takes root, how consent and manipulation are often misunderstood, and why young people remain vulnerable to these kinds of abuses.
Conversations are happening, and Channel Africa is at the heart of them. We tell the African story with clarity, pride, and purpose, reaching audiences that matter to your brand. Partner with us and connect your business with listeners across borders in multiple languages and markets. For partnership opportunities, sponsorship, or sales, email us at partnership@channelafrica.co.za. Channel Africa, the African perspective. Hashtag on the move and connect with us.
Last year, I went on holiday with my partner to Madagascar. It's an incredible place with really friendly, amazing people. And one of the nights that we were there, we decided to, go out on the town. We were on one of the islands, not, in the main city. And on one of the islands, we go out on the night and there's a lot of tourism taking place there, a lot of European tourism taking place there. But what we also noticed as we were, exploring the place with our travel guide was that there's a lot of sex tourism that was taking place. So we're going out in the town, we're looking for a place to, have some food, a restaurant, and it's busy, the place is abuzz, and there's so many older men just in the restaurants, on the streets with these very, very young women. And as we had conversations with our tourist guide throughout the week that we were there, he kept telling us that, well, as a young lady in these parts of Madagascar, your only option for your life to become better is for you to participate in sex tourism. So young girls leave school before they even get to high school, and their parents, their communities encourage them to start sex tourism so they can help the family out, bring more money into the family. And it was really, really disturbing to see it happen with my own eyes. And I speak about this because we're speaking about sexual exploitation on the African continent and how it's been taking root, but also why young people remain vulnerable to abuse. Professor Amanda Gouws continues this conversation with us. Professor Gouws is a gender politics expert. Professor, I found this really disturbing, the fact that there was no other option for young women to become successful other than going into sex tourism. And one says that's a choice, right? They want to make money and they found an avenue to make money. But it's more than a choice. It's almost like a societal expectation for them because, when the rest of the family is looking to you to grow up and start making money for the family, you don't have much of a choice, do you?
Absolutely. And especially where there's the economy is very precarious, or there's really no economy to speak of that can actually absorb young people into jobs. Then for women and for men, I have to say that I was in Mauritius where I observed the same thing, but in this case it was a well-known thing that women from Europe come, and then the people they have relationships or this type of sextortion with are young African men. So and that's, I actually engaged one of these young men, and he said there is nothing else to do on the island for young people who cannot find jobs, whether they women or men. They get into the sort of sex tourism, and I think this is very problematic, because what do you do if there's no other work to do, right? And then if you even encouraged by your family, and it becomes normalized. So what this is, it's normalized. But if we look at the psychological consequences of this, we see that what most and specifically women suffer from that does this type of work is shame. They feel ashamed because their body has become a currency. It's a currency that's being used in order to get something else. And it's also a dangerous type of thing to be involved with, because you can contract sexually transmitted diseases. Women can get pregnant. And these people who are actually tourists, they come and they go. They don't even know that they may have fathered the child somewhere else. So it's really hugely problematic, and it put all the responsibility on the shoulders of the young women who do this work. They have to take care of their bodies. They have to make sure of that they, for example, do not get pregnant, and nobody else cares about what happens to that body. And I think this is, when bodies become currencies, it's really, I think it's unacceptable, and where communities they normalize it, it's even more problematic.
Yeah. And the thing about it is that the same communities that normalize this exploitation to take place, and not just in the sex tourism, instances that we speak of, even, those who are looking for opportunities, the person who's left to blame is the victim themselves, because, everyone victim blames and says, you had a choice. Why would you go that avenue? There are plenty other people who take other routes towards their success. Why would that be the route that you take? What are the larger impacts for these individuals who are exploited sexually that remains with them for the rest of their lives?
Yes, well, I think the first problem here is that, when countries' economies is in a state that there no other work, then that causes a vulnerability, which means that maybe people leave school early, and in cases of sexual quid pro quo in schools, girls may drop out. So their skill levels are low, which means they cannot later in life access other types of work because they haven't finished school, they haven't been taught any other skills. So it puts that victim of sextortion in a situation that will last throughout her lifetime. So she will have those types of drawbacks. But it's also very problematic if it becomes normalized, because, as you've pointed out, it's then the victim gets blamed, right? That you have said yes. And if we go back to #MeToo, if we look at how many women then clicked, it was millions of women around the world who also clicked on this link that you could say Me Too, which means that, and many of them were professional women, some of them were professors, that they have experienced something like this. So it's pervasive. But if you're in a workplace, there's some grievance procedures and disciplinary complaints that you can make. But if you're not in a job, where do you go? Who do you report to? And what the study has shown is that about 26% of women have reported their experience of sexual corruption. 26% is very low. And the main reason that they didn't report was because they feel shame and they don't want people to know. So I think that we have to, and this is why the terminology has changed from quid pro quo sexual harassment, which means I give you something in return for something else, to now sexual sextortion and sexual corruption, because this is a form of corruption. And if we don't treat it like that, if we don't say that this has a public face and this is all about power, then we're not going to actually get a grip on this. And I think this is important, that we also raise consciousness, because in this study, 80% of the sample has said, I know somebody this has happened to.
Yeah.
So it tells you something about how pervasive this is. And I think, we need to make new legislation that also help in coming to grips with this phenomenon. I think, sexual harassment laws, there are laws, but they're not really coming to grips with this sort of transactional nature of this phenomenon, right? It is completely transactional. And for that, we need new type of legislation.
Well, we'll leave it there, Professor. I think that's, a great way to wrap it up. It is a huge issue that's taking place, and one that's still going to be, I think, a societal challenge still for some time to come. But thank you so much for your time this morning.
It's a pleasure. And can I just end by saying there is now a global awareness of this, and there is actually international corruption agencies going to look into this. So at least there's movement on that front.
Incredible. That's Professor Amanda Gouws, a gender politics expert, and we're speaking about sexual exploitation. Let us know what you think about this conversation on our WhatsApp line, +2783 288 6684. Let's get our latest sports news.